Hello and welcome back to the Let's Face It podcast. Today we're joined by someone who I've been trying to get on since probably I started the podcast. It's probably, this is a season of me getting a hold of people that I've been trying to get a hold of for 2 years. Is the wonderful Declan Lawn, someone that we'll talk about it in a wee bit. But anyway, this episode is sponsored by Joxer. I went to Joxer before a dip in Helens Bay 4 weeks ago. And I went in, and if anyone knows me now and follows me on Instagram and sees my stories every day, there's a matcha, which is the green thing, which is like a slow release of caffeine and all these vitamins and stuff, Declan. But Joxer do a nice matcha. They also do nice chicken waffles, but I'm not allowed them at the minute because I'm trying to be sort of way half decent. But yeah, Lindsay and all the team at Joxer are wonderful people. I know they're big supporters of all the comedians on their podcast too, and they're big advocates for mental health and well-being, especially within the north, and I really, really appreciate their support. So go check out Joxer. I went to the one in Bangor, so if you're going for a wee swim race dip over at Helens Bay, go for the dip, come back, go into Joxer, get a matcha, a coffee, and a wee breakfast to set your day off. Or there's another one in Hillsborough at Lisburn Street. The one in Bangor is in Church Street. The one in Hillsborough is in Lisburn Street. You can get brunch Monday to Sunday, 8 to 4. Bring your coffee, bring your dogs, no reservation required. But they also have a late night menu. So any of you folks who like to go and are able to drink responsibly and have a wee cocktail and all that crack, you can go there and enjoy that. So hit them up on www.joxer.co.uk. You can see their menu, but I would highly recommend it, even if it is for a breakfast, for a lunch, or late night. Or go for a wee cocktail, all that crack. Lovely place. Follow them on Instagram and Facebook, Joxer Official. I'll tag them below. But thanks to Lindsay and all the team. Really, really appreciate your support. Wouldn't be possible without you, so thank you. Today we're joined by... I would say... I have a story, right? And the very first night, I often talk about... So my last 2 live events, Declan, I've ripped McConnell to shreds. Because I forget what date it was, but it was a Friday evening and I was supposed to meet Mick the next day, and he didn't turn up, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing this podcast for? This is a nightmare. No one even wants to sit with me, and I know what you get in your head. Yeah, totally. But he turned up the next day anyway. But I often talk about that's like the first, like, I don't know, step of the journey, and let's face it or whatever. But the actual first step was I done a podcast with you through Inspire Wellbeing.
That's right.
I think it was over lockdown, was it?
It was. So they approached me, Inspire Wellbeing approached me during lockdown and said, would you like to do a podcast basically about this kind of thing, well-being, mental health? And you were one of the guests on it. And I remember, obviously I knew a bit about you, like on the sports field and stuff, but I didn't really know much about your story, and you kind of vaguely about it. I remember when you told it to me that day, it was on Zoom because it was lockdown. And I remember like closing the Zoom down and going to my wife going like, oh my God, I've just heard the most amazing story. And I think that as far as I recall, that was that was the most popular of that wee series.
Yeah.
So that's how we met. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that ever since we've always sort of ding dong back and forward and got in contact, and I've asked you for wee nuggets, and you've been it's unbelievable. So someone, I was talking about this the other day, and someone was like, so what do you do for your podcasts? Like, how do you do that? Because I've seen someone putting up a post, and this is what you do for research, and this is what you do, and something like it was a combination of like 10 hours before they actually sat on the seat. And someone sent me, it was like, is this what you do as well? And I was like, no. And I was like, I was always told by this guy to have kind of, you're the guy. So I rang you and was like, Declan, I done a podcast with you because I've done loads of them, and I was like, but somehow I was able to talk and express, and you were able to get things out of me in a good way that I've never done before. How did you do that? And I was like, just because I'm starting a podcast. And you were like, that's amazing. So we were going through, and you were giving me these points of not having a script and being authentic and having 4 pillars to maybe fall back on. And when someone's talking, then you
don't have a list of questions, just question the answers.
Question the answers, and that's basically how I've made a living for the last 2 years.
Now I feel, now that I'm sitting here on the famous sofa, I feel I've made a rod for my own back, because I'm like, oh no, I've told him how to do it. He's going to get things out of me that I don't want to say. But it's funny, actually. I've done a lot of podcasts and interviews and stuff, but coming on here and following this podcast series on YouTube and Spotify and stuff, it's the first time in ages I've been nervous about it, because I'm like, this is personal, you know. It's I'm not just talking about work or whatever.
Yeah, and let's get into it. And as you know, we started off this podcast as this is my journey, and people coming from childhood and up, and sometimes there's trauma, and sometimes there's people who have been rather successful and stuff like that. And from the outside looking into your life, especially over the last couple of years, seeing your growth and seeing like what you've done, and then actually going in behind it all and seeing like with like spotlight and different things that you've achieved, and I'm like, wow, this person actually wants to come on to my podcast. So I'm honoured. So thank you.
I'm honoured, man. Honestly, the work you're doing here is really important. Like, it's great to be here.
No, thank you. So for those who don't know you, let's you introduce yourself of who you are and what you are and who you come from and where you come from. And
so I suppose starting with where I come from is a wee bit complicated. So my dad worked in the bank, so we would, as a family, get transferred a lot. So I was in Derry till I was 8. Then we moved to Limavady until I was 12, but I kept going to school in Derry. Then we moved to Ballymena, and I finished secondary school there till I was 18. Then I went to Dublin uni and stayed for another 3 years. Then in 2002 came back to Belfast. So I've been here for like 21 years. So this is home now. Like, this is, you know, this is it. Like, this is the place where I feel at home, you know, and friends, family, all that stuff. But when I was growing up, I didn't have the same sense that you probably had growing up in West Belfast of a single place that was home. It seemed that every time I kind of got my feet under the table, made friends, you know, started playing sport or whatever, we were off again. So, I mean, obviously we were never moving far, but when you're like 8 or 11, you might as well be going to Cork or something, you know, because you've no way of contacting your old mates and stuff. So I find that quite disruptive in a way. Definitely found it quite difficult, but never really had a situation where I didn't settle. You know, everywhere I went to next, you know, made friends and overall had a really like great upbringing. You know, like just like no complaints at all. Great parents, younger brother, younger sister, and I became a journalist for the BBC in 2002. Did that for 16 years, and then there was a transition period where I wanted to be a writer. Always did want to be a writer. We can get into all that in a minute. But yeah, the short answer is took myself and my writing partner Adam about 7 or 8 years to kind of, you know, get enough momentum to do it for a living. And then 3 years ago, I'm 46 now, so yeah, 2020, a show, or the first show we ever wrote called The Salisbury Poisonings went out, and our lives started to change. And then in the last 3 years, like, it's been incredible, and my life has completely changed. Like, it's just completely different now. And so it happened, you know, I don't want to say late in life. I don't feel like I'm late in life, but it happened after a full other life and career. It just this thing happened, and here we are. And if you'd said it to me even 5 years ago, I would never have believed it.
Yeah, and that is incredible. And we'll talk about even that transition from, like, maybe, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but maybe going and chasing work and trying to get the next thing just to keep going, and then boom, like this.
But so you know yourself, right? Anything worthwhile is forged in like pain and difficulty and rejection and disappointment. Like anything, like everything I've ever done in life, whether it's a documentary or a drama series, there's always a point in the middle of it or at some point where I'm like, I can't do this. I can't go on. It's too much. It's too hard. It's too difficult. Every single thing. And anything that I've ever done that has felt kind of relatively easy or straightforward has never been particularly, you know, well received or successful. I find anyway that you have to go to the very like edge of what you're capable of, like physically, mentally, emotionally, to do anything that's really, really worthwhile. Just like being an Antrim hurler, you know, you have to like absolutely kill yourself in training in order to be good enough to pull on the jersey. So, yeah,
yeah, and we'll talk about that a wee bit more, about maybe even because we have a demographic of kind of young people, maybe 18 to maybe 26, 27, 30, and it's like, they're kind of like, I want it and I like the idea of it, but you need to take action in terms of chasing it. But let's talk about there's a quote there: every scene in the drama from Salisbury, every scene of the drama is set on the theme of the community versus chaos.
Yeah,
which was informed by our upbringing in Northern Ireland. Let's talk a wee bit more about how that had an impact in terms of you growing up.
So I was born in Derry in 1976. And it's a really strange thing when I look back on it now, because my parents moved to Derry. My mum was from Galway. My dad was from Ballyshannon and Donegal. They worked in the Bank of Ireland, and they moved to Derry in 74, right? Like right into the melting pot there of, the height of the Troubles, probably alongside Belfast, the epicentre of the Troubles, I suppose. And I often said to my dad afterwards, why did you do that? You could have had a nice life in Donegal or Galway. And so part of it was a career thing. I think it was easier to get promoted if you were willing to move north, because not many people were. And then another part of it, he was like, we were young. We were like 23, 24. It was like fun and adventurous and stuff. So I have memories. So I guess left Derry in 84, right? So my earliest memories would have been of being there. And my parents going to work, and those were the days where, like from our house, you could hear bombs going off, And I was probably about 7 or 8 when I had this kind of realization that it was very dangerous in the town. Even when I would be there with my mum or Helen, who looked after us when they were at work, bomb scares and all this kind of stuff, and I remember having this point in my life where when people are 7 or 8 and they discover anxiety. I remember discovering that, and my anxiety was totally fixated and focused on my parents not coming home, and it affected me. Like in a way, I think it kind of affects me to this day, and I still, part of the reason. So I'm not the best analyst of my own motives or psychology, right? But my kind of like crappy way of doing it. Sometimes I think part of the reason that I work so hard is that I don't like to not have extreme focus. So like if I go on holiday, for example, me and Breeds and the kids go to Portugal or whatever, I can do like 2 days in a sun lounger, and then it's like antsy time. Then it's like, what am I doing here? Why am I not doing something? Why am I not concentrating on something? And yeah, you just start getting really like fidgety and stuff. So yeah, I'm not one for those holidays where, and I think about that, and I think I consistently throw myself into stuff because I don't particularly like not having things to think about. It's weird.
It's not. It's really interesting because can you say Declan today, who is going on a holiday and sitting for 2 days and being like, right, I need to have a focus. I need to bury my head into something. Can you see maybe a 10, 12, 13-year-old Declan within that? Because did you say you're sitting in this anxiety of maybe feeling like your parents aren't going to come home and, being uptight? Did you then, as a result of that, bury your head in something else at that time in terms of schoolwork, in terms of sport, in terms of I'm not saying escape, but maybe make you feel that wee bit better?
Yeah, totally. Like, I think I've always been quite intense in everything I've done, and quite like maybe even super committed to everything. In the journalism years, I was like ridiculously committed to that, and we'll talk about that again in a minute, because there was a point in my 30s where that commitment just got totally out of control, and I just completely lost focus. The focus was in the wrong place in life. So yeah, I do have that tendency, really. Like, so I'm at the very end now of the process of writing the second series with Blue Lights. Like, I mean, literally like a couple of days away from locking the final scripts, even though we're already filming the first scripts. And there's a part of me that can't wait. It's been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Been extraordinarily time consuming and tough and difficult. And then there's another little part of me that's like, once all those scripts are locked and my main job on the show is over, I mean, I'm still helping Adam direct, there's a little tiny voice in my head going, all right, what are you going to do then? Like, you're going to be, once you start sitting around the house, or I wouldn't exactly be sitting around the house, not until the show's done, but there's always a voice going like, right, okay, you need to start thinking about the next thing, and that's not healthy. Like, I mean, I know I need to sort that out. My breed is always saying to me, you need to be able to just spend a couple of weeks relaxing. Yeah. I find it hard, like, I do.
That's so interesting, isn't it? And it's like, so would you, before we're going to the journey, but would you find it hard to give yourself praise?
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many, like...
So say, for an example,
lines,
right?
Yeah.
So say, like, you're talking about blue lights, and I'm just like, I'm smiling, you're smiling, and I'm like, that is unbelievable. I'm sitting with a person who actually, I looked forward, so as a result of your work, was like, couldn't wait to the next week, or couldn't wait to the next episode, because that's how you made me feel. So that's why I was like, right, Sean, say it, that's why I was like, so filled up there, so happy, because I was like, that's the impact that you've had on me.
Yeah.
People, let's talk about then even some people coming up to me as a result of maybe this podcast or me going and helping them, and they're like, you don't understand it, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
So how do you feel when people say that? Because that must be,
I find it very hard as well. So that's where I'm getting that. So I'm like, you don't realise the impact that you have made across our community, say in loads of people's living rooms. And I probably don't realise the impact, but do I want to realise, or do I have a problem accepting praise? Yes, 100%. And that's why I was kind of smiling there going, Jesus, would you be like that? Because you're like, right, I need to just keep going because I don't...
Yes, so...
Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. So the short answer is yes, and the slightly longer answer is I'm getting better at it. I'm getting slowly better at it, like in my 40s, like I've been getting slowly better at going, being able to say to myself, you're good at this, right? Which is sounds to me like a really grandiose and like, arrogant thing to say is you're good at this, right? But at some point in life, if you're going to have a purpose and you're going to devote yourself to something, you have to allow yourself to say like, you're good at it with not in a way. Look, here's me even now trying to qualify and caveat that, and I hope people don't think I'm going around thinking I'm brilliant. But that is the problem, isn't it? It's like, on one level, you have to believe that you're good at it, or otherwise, what's the point in doing it? But on the other, there's something about the psyche here, north of Ireland, Belfast, whatever, which is like, oh no, you can't admit that. But I am getting a wee bit better at it, like in thinking, no, it's okay to say like we made something good here, and I do stress the way as well. Like there's a lot of us involved in writing as well as everything. But it's at some point you see the reaction to it, and you see all that, and you think, yeah, it's okay to say we did something good there. But the problem that I had, and this was, I would say probably one of the biggest mental blocks in my life ever, was that I always knew I wanted to be a writer from when I was like 4 years old, 5. Always knew, I loved reading books. Wrote a play when I was in P3, another one P7, school put it on. It was like, I was just like, this is amazing. And at some point, and I literally still keep trying to think about it and work it out, at some point I was consumed by self-doubt about it. I just totally, and I mean to the point where if I would sit down in my, say, like 20s during uni or later 20s, try and write a short story or something, I would maybe get to half a page and go, this is absolute shite. And I would... Or I might say I managed to write 4 or 5 pages, and I'd wake up the next day and read it, and I'd be like, this is just so awful and callow and juvenile and terrible. And I was right through my 20s and 30s, right till I was in my late 30s, I had this massive dichotomy of going, I know that that's what I want to do, right? And I kind of feel I should be good at it, but I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. I felt, and looking back now, part of me thinks it was about fear, right? And the fear was, it's better to think that I will do it someday and be really good at it, rather than actually have to do it and find out that I'm not good at it. Because it was, even though I didn't do it, it was such a part of my identity. Like, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. That not doing it became easier, because it was like, what if I really throw myself at this, and then people are getting back to me going, no, it's not good enough. And I was like, that's going to crush me. Like, so I just didn't do it. It was so paralyzing, and it resulted, as I mentioned earlier, in my 30s of just like bad decisions and just throwing myself into a multitude of things that was the wrong, you know what I mean?
Because it was maybe out of alignment of who you are or what you're about, or...
So I suppose what I'm saying is, right, so I had this all-consuming thing going, I want to write. I wasn't doing it for whatever messed up reason that I you know, and so I found myself hugely throwing myself into journalism, right? Like massively, like, you know, probably in those early years when the kids were really young, at the expense of them. I was always on the road. I was always away traveling. And then other things like, you know, bushcraft, camping, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, just literally, right, did a law degree in my 30s, man. I was a journalist and I did a law degree in the evenings.
Impressive.
I mean, in a sense it is, right? But in another sense, I see now that it was all...
something missing.
Prevarication. It was all like, I would do anything not to have to do the thing that I knew that I wanted to do. And so one of the ways my life has changed, apart from, you know, having this random success that we've had over the last 3 years, is I don't feel any of that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll go to the gym now, or I'll go for a walk, or I don't feel any compulsion to go, now I'm going to be, you know, the best this ever. Now. And now I'm just like, now I know what I'm doing now, and everything else is where it should be, I think.
And you said 100%, and you said there, let's go back even to the start, whenever we were chatting there, and you says, well, it's kind of like being an Antrim hurler. You need to put everything into it. You need to train your arse off. You need to, it's like blood, sweat and tears, essentially. So at what point did your perspective shift and be like, right, okay, I'm not effing about, but I'm not really going after what I believe in? Or was there any barriers broken down and be like, do you know what? Or was it the help of other people?
Yeah.
The importance of maybe other people in your life, maybe pushing you that way? And maybe what changed for you to be like, right, I need to stop running about building Brazilian jiu-jitsu, doing law degrees, and actually go after what I'm put on this earth for?
So the biggest influence in my life is my wife Breach, who you've been married to for 18 years, and she just has a very much clearer view of who I am and my advantages and flaws than anyone else. So she would have been saying to me, why are you doing all this stuff? Right. Like another example, in my early 30s, I slightly got into running, just went out doing the odd 5Ks. And then in like 19 months, I ran 4 marathons. Just like, so she would have been saying to me, I mean, literally saying to me, like, what are you running from? Like, why are you doing all this stuff? What is it you want to really do? Right. So she was important. And then there were 2 other things. One was losing someone, one was finding someone. So I lost my dad at 32 to cancer, esophageal cancer, which is a nasty one. That was a terrible shock for all of us in our family. And that took away one of the pillars that I had, right, which was, I'll do it later. I'll be a writer later, right? Because he was 56 when he got it, 57 when he died. And suddenly I had this overwhelming sense of like mortality and the shortness of life, right? So this thing that I always had in my head, which is like, I'll take that risk later. Suddenly that wasn't available to me anymore, because I was like, at any time, any of us could be like diagnosed with something or, knocked down by a car. And I didn't have up until that point a real sense of mortality. Nothing like that had ever really happened in our family before. Most people had died in old age. So that really made me think, God, if you're going to, I need to get on with this here. And then the other thing, I do believe in serendipity. I believe in God. I believe in that this is not just, some kind of materialist like experience. But the other thing is that just 3 weeks after my dad died, I was back doing my first Panorama, and I met Adam Patterson, who was then an assistant producer on this Panorama. He's from Dromore here, but we were shooting in Wales. Now this is going back, this is 2009, so what's that, 14 years ago? Mm-hmm. So I met him and got on with him got to know him a bit more, and he was like a photojournalist on the side and a documentary filmmaker. And we knew each other for 3 or 4 years, but we kept having these conversations about like, wouldn't it be great to do something fictional, a short film or a drama? Wouldn't that be me? We kept talking about this, and then there was one where you're asking like, what did it hinge on? One night, like I can remember it like so clearly. It was July 2013. I think we'd just been working covering a loyalist band parade or something. We'd been working together, and went back to his flat in the city centre for a beer, and we were watching short films, like fictional short films that had won BAFTAs and stuff on his TV. And he turned to me and he said, "Dude, we have to do this. We have to do this. You have to," because he's really into directing. He loves filmmaking, directing. I'm more of a writer, although we both do both of those things. But he said, "We have to do this. You need to write a short film, and I need to direct it." Now you should have him on this podcast sometime, right? He's very kind of
he's signed up already.
He's quite Adam. You're
in.
He'd admit himself he's quite stubborn and he never lets up on anything. And he kept haranguing me to say, "Just write a short film. We'll get money somewhere. We'll direct it." And we talked about, we essentially kind of wrote it together, really based on research he'd done, and but I did, so I wrote it, and that was it. So I say that was it. I'll talk to you about this the next bit later, about the 7 years of kind of pain and rejection. But that was it in terms of starting writing. So we sent it to a girl who we knew in BBC Drama, who was a trainee script editor, Laura Conway. And I remember the day she got back a couple of weeks later to go, "This is really good." And I swear, it was like, I don't know if she knows that. I think I have said it to her. But that sentence going, "This is really good," is like a 6-page script or something. Like, everything changed for me in that instance. I was like, I've just written something and someone has said it's good. And it was like, it's kind of indescribable. It was just like, it was like a switch was flicked, and I was like, okay, so I think maybe I can do this. And then that was it. And then it was like, it was like a valve had been opened, and I kind of couldn't stop. It was just like coming up with ideas, writing, pitching them. We ended up getting an agent after 2 or 3 years. But the process was punishing and tortuous and hard of, get an agent, get into the industry, meet people. Like, I'll tell you how that works in a minute. But there's a difference between the process of trying to succeed and the act of writing, which two completely different things. Because the act of writing is like, if that's what you're supposed to be doing, like in and of itself, that is massive. That's, for me, I was just like able to go home and go like, well, like I'm writing a screenplay, and I've got an idea, and I'm learning, reading books, learning about structure, going to courses. I'd finally found my purpose, and it was just crazy. It was just like, I've been trying to put this square brick in a round hole or a triangular hole my entire life, and suddenly it just went in. I was like, this is it then. This is it. Like,
that's incredible.
And everything else just kind of fell away. It was just like, that was it. That's
amazing. And that is it. There's like is it fair to say like there would be a massive shift within your own self-worth in terms of not identity, but maybe how you felt and approached getting up in the morning, or like, you mentioned purpose there,
100%. So like after that, I was still working for the BBC, doing my job, my day job for like 6 years, but knowing that you had this other thing going on, this thing that we could aspire to, and this thing, and there was always there was points where it was extraordinarily difficult. I mean, like, just breaking into the world of drama in London it's so difficult, and there were points where Adam and I almost felt like giving up, but one of us always wanted to continue at any particular time. But the difference was, like, I was writing, and there was so there's a writer called Kurt Vonnegut, and he wrote this letter to a junior high class in America in maybe the 60s or 70s or something, and it's really famous, called Letter to Miss Lockwood's Class. It's about writing, and he says to them all, your homework tonight is to write a poem, 12 lines long. Try and make each couplet rhyme. Write it about something. Spend time on it. Spend a few hours on it. Do it as best you possibly can. and then when you're finished it, tear it up and throw it in the bin, and don't ever show it to anyone. And in the process of doing that, you have grown as a person. Your soul has grown. And I remember reading that going, yeah, that's it, right? Because whatever about the success or whatever about, the reception, once you're doing it, if that's what you're supposed to be doing, and I do think some people are just supposed to be writers, once you're doing it, everything inside changes. And you can put up with an awful lot of rejection at that point. You can really, like not an infinite amount, certainly, but you can put up with a lot.
Let's talk about rejection. Let's talk about the journey of...
You're talking to an expert in that, like...
Because I think that, in the introduction of this podcast, and maybe we started doing like podcast, not trailers, but just like a thing on Instagram where it's like talking about, and the first thing I'll say about you is I have Declan Lawn, the producer of Blue Lights, producer of this, that and the other, great man, and this is who he is, but that's only the tip of the iceberg essentially, and people don't see, and it's the same in sports, it's the same. I love reading books, I love listening to and nearly it stems from some sort of trauma or rejection or not being good enough or the self-worth or the questioning themselves or maybe escaping into something else, like what you're just saying there. Like, people don't see all that. They just see the sunshine and the rainbows. So
it's like, like these guys go and win Joe McDonough or whatever, or have a great game, or beat somebody, and that's what we all see is like right there, success. But like, think about every game you've lost for St. John's, or every game you've lost, every shitty training session on a Tuesday night in February, right? Like, and all of the times when you've been told you're not good enough, or it's we're dropping you from the team, or you're not working, like that's what forges like victory. Like that is it. Like there's nothing, like we said at the start. I don't think you can do anything worthwhile genuinely without pain and suffering. Like I think anything I've done now in the last 10 years, 100% was instigated by the like really difficult traumatic death of my dad, which set me on a path to take risks. So yeah, like, I think you're always talking in this podcast, and I heard Neil McManus talking recently as well about the confluence of sport and life. And I'm coaching our under 13s hurling and at St. Bridget's, and the confluence of sport and life is so overwhelming, because it's ultimately it's a team sport, but it's like individual responsibility. If you want to get half a pace faster, if you want to be able to, lift the ball quicker, if you want to strike on your weak side better, like that ultimately is up to you, and that is the thing that I just, anyway, I'm probably rambling there.
But you're right, that the buck does stop with us. So at some point, there has to be like, right, either you fall into this sort of you're not good enough and believe it, or you challenge the thoughts, you challenge the people who are saying you're not good enough, you challenge the inner critic, you challenge the chimp, and be like, do you know what? Let's take responsibility. We have a choice.
But it's such a rebellious act to do that, right? Because the world, this kind of capitalist world that we live in, is kind of designed to keep people in their box.
In the corner.
It's designed to keep people in their box, make sure they, I don't know, whatever. Like
but you're right. So like you grow up, and I've talked about it before, and you've probably heard me talk about it before. Like you grow up in school, you go to secondary school, and then you go to university, you meet a girl, you get married, you get a 9-to-5 job, and then you do that until you're 70, and then you die, and that's just the way you're supposed to be. And it's like, and
the overwhelming organisation of our society is kind of depends on most people accepting that, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the good things now about social media and podcasts and is that people can be exposed to the idea that basically all the work you're doing here, all the podcasts I've listened to here, is like, in terms of your own experiences, you can be in a place, right, and you have it within you, like a year, 2, 4 years later, to be in a completely different place, right? I mean, that's what's happened to you. It's kind of what's happened to me, right? You have it within you to change things so fundamentally. Like that's kind of the essence of this podcast, isn't it? But the thing is, but the world will try to tell you different. The world will try to say, nah, it's not going to happen. Like, So I think your original question was about rejection. So that's basically it, isn't it? That's what rejection is trying to tell you, that it's not really for you. And Adam and I just had some absolute like stinkers of rejections, because writing a pilot script, 60 pages of TV, takes a long time to research. And, we would be writing these things, sending them in to production companies. They might take them on board, send them to the BBC, whatever. And yeah, we just had many rejections. We were in a writer's room once that we thought was going really well. We were fired from it. They decided that one of the other writers in the room was better and they wanted to go with him. And it was just like, there's so many points. And I honestly think, Adam says this too, like maybe genuinely if it had been just one of us going through all this, you actually might have said, you know what, like it's just too emotionally taxing. But because there was two of us, one of us was always slightly more optimistic than the other one. And you go, no, mate, let's just continue 2 more months. We've got one more thing in the pan. But yeah, there were some low points, like really low points. And when I look back now, yeah, you just think, one of the things I am quite proud of myself is just getting through that, taking all those punches. And eventually the Salisbury Poisonings was commissioned, after us trying God knows how many times with other stuff. It wasn't the thing we expected we commissioned. We were working on another project at the time we thought might actually happen. And then that was the one that just came out of nowhere and completely changed everything. Like,
and that's incredible. This, like, as I just said, there people don't see that part, but how resilient does that then make you, having that foundation of rejection to make you then blossom in terms of the success? And let's talk about the success then. Let's talk about like that breakthrough and how that felt and how the two of you felt, I suppose, because at the end of the day, it's probably like a working marriage at this stage.
Yeah, man. So first, on that point, it's a really like it's a great relationship. Outside of like my immediate family, Breeds and the kids, and also my wider family, mum and my brother and sister. It's the most important relationship in my life, and it's an interesting one, right? Because we don't do exactly the same thing. I'm kind of more gravitated towards the writing, and he's more gravitated towards directing. But he does write with me, and I do direct with him. But we have different interests. But it's just a very creative thing, and a very kind of so we have a little office about this size on the Lisburn Road. When we're not in production with something, we're in there every day. Just kind of shooting the shit and talking about stuff, and like talking about things that interest us and what we want to do next. And then sometimes when it's busy, like we'll be like putting post-its on the walls, trying to write scenes and stuff. And then on the other hand, it's quite like so we do socialize together, but not that much, right? Mm-hmm. Because that would be too much. I'm actually going to see him later tonight, actually, but he's got a family, I've got a family. We're not like, constantly like, oh, right, well, let's go for a beer, let's go for food. And that's kind of really important too, And then sometimes we'll go away for, a business trip to London and like, have dinner and a few pints and have the best fun ever. But it's this kind of like, we've found this kind of balance in terms of
healthy boundaries.
I kind of very healthy, like say when Friday comes, most weekends I'll not be chatting to Adam again till Monday.
I love that.
But then when we are chatting, it's like he's just been through so much, like whatever it is now. As I said, we met in 2009, but we've been through a lot of ups and downs. So you kind of feel like we're kind of forged in experience, really,
Yeah.
But yeah, the success. Yeah, you were going to ask about the success thing. It's it's kind of bizarre. It's bizarre. Sometimes it's slightly uncomfortable, but mostly it is class. Like,
that's unreal.
Yeah. And like, I can't sit here and go, oh no, it's very difficult. No, it's class. Like, it's 95% class, and the thing that's most class about it is when people are genuinely responding to what you've made, and in a really genuine way, going, I love this, or I love this character, and yeah, like what more do you want? It's brilliant, and I think it is kind of okay to feel that when you've been through the hard times, and yeah, like it'd be like like if you won an All Ireland, you're not going to be sitting there going, yeah, it's all right. You're going to be going, no, it's absolutely amazing.
This is unreal, and let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about I'm so interested in this, right? And I know a lot of people are, in terms of how can we use blue lights?
Yeah.
Let's talk about blue lights. What does that look like? How do you use, like, you say you're sitting in an office in Lisburn Road, I can picture post-its on the wall, used to having the crack, getting on like 2 kids half the time, you know, like trying to, how the process of you writing, maybe Adam directing, him coming and doing a bit of writing, everything that you've just explained, how does this come about? You mentioned
how does it work?
How does it work? And you mentioned the agents in that world that you were going to talk a wee bit about that. So let's talk about the bringing things together in terms of getting this off the ground and making it to be one of the most talked about things. Because I wouldn't be a big TV man, so this grabbed me. So
the way it works with us is it's all about the research. So Adam and I were both journalists for a long time. So we're mostly interested in doing things. Not necessarily real life stories like the Salisbury Poisonings, which was, almost a docudrama really, but doing things that about contemporary life that are real and that you can research. So Blue Light wasn't actually our idea. It was Louise Gallagher from Gallagher Films and Stephen Wright from Two Cities came to us just as we were finishing the Salisbury Poisonings, saying we've got this idea about a woman who joins the PSNI in her 40s. Which is actually relatively common, believe it or not. They have quite a lot of older joiners. Anyway, and we were like, okay, does the world need another cop drama? I don't know. But Louise is like, why don't you take a couple of weeks, meet a few cops, research it. We'll set you up, have a few conversations with response cops.
So real cops?
Real cops, yeah.
Right.
And so we met 3 or 4 of them, and then that was the point where we're like, okay, this is crazy. Like the stuff these guys do every day, the stuff they're exposed to, the toll it takes on their family life, just what a normal, regular response cop does in East or West or North Belfast or South Belfast is, it's mad. Okay. It's mad. So we were listening to their accounts of like what a regular shift might involve, and we were going, okay, that's mad. And I haven't really seen anything about response cops. Certainly not on this side of the Atlantic, maybe not since the bill. And we were like, okay, so if you just do the guys who are out on the ground, forget about, murder investigations and detectives. So we were kind of hooked, quite interested. And then basically the BBC commissioned a pilot script. And at that point we were like, right, we want to meet all the cops we can. So we just, everybody that we ever knew who had a connection to the PSNI, we're like, can we meet you? Can we talk to you? So that's how it works, right? So you go out and you meet them, take notes, come back, type them up, and then you're just left with all of these files of information of things that's happened to people, calls that been on, the kind of colleagues they've worked with. And at that point then we go, right, let's try and turn this into a pilot script. So you start with characters. So you go, right, so what kind of, you want a range of characters who are all different, right? So we have the former social worker. Who should she be working with? Well, she should be working with a kind of a cynical old hand guy, so let's create him. And then what if we have like a young guy who's like, somebody had said to us, one of the cops had told us about they had a real trouble learning how to shoot. So we're like, let's have a guy in it who doesn't know how to shoot. He's young. So we just sit there, right? And we talk about character, and that's how it starts. And we're like, here are the characters, who are we following? And then you just kind of merge it into drama. And the way that we tend to do it to start with is like a big wall like that, Post-it notes. It's like, you have kind of act 1, act 2, act 3, and you go, okay, what about this, what about that? But it's all research. So Adam and I don't think we could ever write like science fiction or a fantasy series, because we're not the kind of guys that just sit down and go, let's just dream shit up. We just can't. We can't. We're still essentially journalists at heart, right? So we have to have big files full of information and then kind of turn that into drama. That's the only way we can work, like.
That's unbelievable, and I'm just like, this is so exciting. So we've picked out sort of acts and what they're going to be doing or whatever, some sort of like this is the guy who can't shoot, this is whatever. Yeah,
you have your characters.
Characters, sorry. And then what then is the next step in sort of writing that or like coming up with that? Do you meet characters, or where is this long before you even have a conversation with an actor?
So then what we did, once we had the characters fleshed out, I think we'd actually written a pilot script. The BBC gave us money, which is very unusual. It was kind of new this side of the Atlantic, to run a writer's room. So we had Fran Harris from Dublin, we had a guy called Noel McCann, and we had various people come into this writer's room, and we were able to spend a week just talking about these characters and what might happen to them. And Adam and I were able to say, right, well, a cop told us this is a good, what kind of call could they be going to now? Well, here's a call that we heard about, let's like kind of fictionalize that and dress up. So the writer's room is a really important thing. And then, it's just the process of, right, we've got 6 episodes to write. But it's all character. It's also, where does Grace start in episode 1? Where do we leave her in episode 6? How has she changed? Where does Tommy start? How has he changed? So it's all character. The plot, this is an old truism in TV drama, and you know it when you see it, when you're watching. Like, if you know your character's plot takes care of itself, it just takes care of itself. So you're basically, say Tommy, for example, right, well, we know he's here now, and we know he's on the back foot, and we know he's worried. So what kind of call could we send him to now to make it even worse, or to bring something good out of him? And that's where plot comes from. It's not, you don't sit down and go, and then what happens, and then what happens, because then you get really bad drama. If you're talking about plot, you're losing. Wow. Whereas if you're talking about character, you're almost certainly going to win.
And kind of like how you told me to do a podcast.
Yeah, what do you mean?
In terms of like if you're like on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one.
Yes, I know what you mean now, man. Like if you were sitting there with a clipboard and a list of questions, this would be difficult, right? Yeah. And that is what writing drama, like purely based on plot first, is like. It's like, oh, okay, this thing has happened. What else exciting thing could happen? And it's terrible.
So a free spirit nearly in terms of what you are trying to achieve, in terms of maybe a bit of an artistic license and letting go and like seeing what happens.
Let go. That first writers' room we did, I remember it well. I think it was the end of 2019. It was before the pandemic, but that we had 5 days together and we just talked about character all week. We never said what happens to them. Never said what happens to them. It was just like, who are they, and how do they interact with each other, and like, do they fancy each other, or are they pissed off with each other? And so it's all character. And because for me, right, in terms of writing, in terms of anything, like nothing is more interesting than humans. There's no situation or no location or no set of circumstances is more interesting than a human being, right? And I think as humans, whether we're readers or viewers or whatever, like we're attracted to complexity, and until AI takes over, like we're still the most complex thing in the world, like. Yeah. So there's nothing more interesting than that.
And I agree with you. So it's so all of a sudden I have a connection with them as a person, as in
that's it.
Their interests, who they maybe fancy or what's going on there, and then I have an attachment. So there's an emotional side to it too, isn't there? In terms of feeling like you know that person, like you're feeling like how many times you watched something or even like made something. This is probably more of a question for someone watching or listening to the podcast, and you feel like you're in it, like you feel like you're a part of their lives. Like that is probably how you come about with that, is it? You're trying to build that character.
It's just character writing, and like, and it's just if you put that first, and whatever whether you're looking at film or TV, whoever puts that first, like say, Happy Valley puts that first. The Sopranos puts that first, Mad Men put it first, The West Wing put character first. That's, to me, that's the difference between a great TV drama and a bad TV drama, or is it about the character or is it about the plot?
That's amazing. So, right, okay, so we've discovered the characters, we've sort of drew that all out, we know what that looks like. What's next?
So then
what's that?
I agree. Thank you. So then you're in a situation where once the show is commissioned, right? You'll either write one pilot script or two to get it commissioned. All BBC dramas are no more than 6 hours. Then you're at the business end of things. Then it's like, okay, deadlines now, scripts to come in. It's a great feeling to get a commission. I mean, it's to get a green light, it's amazing. But then it's not kind of you're not kind of messing about anymore. And here's our pilot script. And then it's like we're filming next May. We need a script in the 1st of October, the 1st of September, and all that. So then you are into the situation where it's like, right, it becomes more. I don't want to say mechanical because it's still totally it's still based in art and stuff. But yeah, then it's delivery time, and that can be super stressful. Like this season of Blue Lights that I'm just finishing is without a doubt the hardest thing I've ever done. I think it's good. I think it's better than season 1, but it's been bloody hard. Like,
there's a headline.
Well, you know what? I'll actually let everybody else. I'll let everybody else be the judge of that. That's just my personal opinion. But yeah, but there's definitely an element, especially when you're in production with a show that's already gone out and it's been a success, where it's different. It's kind of like a mini industry. It's like run a medium-sized company, and certain things are much easier to write. Like I know the actors now. I know who's playing the parts. Far easier to write a scene in that sense. But yeah, like challenging.
So that's in layman's terms. Then you talked about scripts. So are you writing these for every single actor?
What do you mean? Writing
so they're coming up. So everything that they're saying on the show, basically.
Yeah, the dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your job as well.
Yeah,
that's what you call that, a dialogue.
Dialogue. Yeah, it's like dialogue when 2 or more actors are talking. So yeah, I'll basically be writing all of that. Like now, there's a lot of cooks with a spoon in the broth. There's a lot of people advising me and giving me notes, and like first of all, Adam. Also, funnily enough, right? I don't think I've ever said this before. So Breeds, my wife is not. People talk about she's so supportive. It's not her support; it's her input. Like
she's co-producer.
She reads everything. No, literally, she's like a silent exec. She should be getting paid. She reads everything I write and gives me advice on it as soon as she watches the edits and the assemblies and stuff. Like she also has a really interesting facility for knowing what good telly is, right? So she can watch like the first 20 minutes of any TV drama and go, that'll be massive, that's going to be a huge success, and she watched the first 20 minutes of Normal People, she's like, it's going to go ballistic. Or she'll watch something and go, that's terrible, and she's like 98% of the time she's right. So I always I put a massive store by what she thinks on the scripts. Like if she's like, this works or it doesn't work, I believe it.
That's incredible. Even
and she's got nothing to do in this industry. She's completely separate, running her own thing. But yeah, she's like she's like a silent partner at all. That's
class. See the dialogue. So how much has to go into? Say I'm an actor and I'm maybe, I don't know, how do you then go, okay, so I have a script here, I have an idea of let's use a cop who can't shoot. Where's the transition between, okay, this is what he's going to look like, this is how he's going to act?
So that's the audition process.
Okay.
So basically, say like Tommy there, right, who you're talking about, Tommy Foster, right? So we know he's a young man, he's not long out of Queen's, he's quite kind of gauche and unworldly, and he's from a middle class, if not kind of posh area of Belfast, and he's completely wide-eyed and innocent and just thrown in at the deep end. So you write a character bio. Let's say it's a page, 500-600 words. This is Tommy, right? We have a casting director. She sends that out. For the first one actually was Daniel Edwards. He would send that out, and Georgia Simpson here in Northern Ireland would send it out to all the actors' agents. Right, like from London to Scotland to here to the south, saying this is the kind of guy we need, and they will send in tapes of like dozens and dozens of actors of the right age, the right kind of look, the right profile, and then you go through them all. You watch all the tapes, and then you narrow it down to maybe 6, 8, 10 who will come to auditions, like in the room, be standing in front of you reading the lines that you've written. And then there's probably about 6 or 8 people who have an input into that. So we'll have a meeting after the auditions and go, right, who did we like? Who's your top 3? And so sometimes it's easy, right? Sometimes there's one person out of dozens, and as soon as you watch their tape, like 30 seconds in, you're like, that's it. Mm-hmm. Like that, I mean, that's literally that's Tommy, right? Or remember in the Salisbury Poisonings, Annabelle Scully, who played Sarah Bailey. I remember watching that audition tape and with 40 seconds in going, okay, that's her. But most of the time, it's super tight. Like most of the time, could be one of 3 people. Now, if you're talking about rejection, man, right? that industry, and both you and I know Shane McNaughton, and he's in that industry in New York now and stuff. I talked to him about this actually. He came to our office a few months ago. Like that idea that and I don't think actors are not really exposed to the conversations that are had. But I'm always thinking, Shane and I were saying this, like, sometimes I want to run after actors who nearly got the job and say, like, you were so close. But that would probably be worse, wouldn't it? Telling them that they were so close. Yeah. But what actors give is everything, right? They're giving you their face, their body, their movement, their voice. Like, they're giving you themselves, and then they hear 2 or 3 days later, oh, you didn't get it. And I'm just like, that industry, you think writing's bad, or playing hurling is bad? Like, it's brutal, man. And I admire them so much for just cracking on. But being an actor is really hard, I think.
And there's that element of being vulnerable in front of people in an audition and putting your fucking everything on the line.
Everything on the line.
For you to be then to come back and be like, actually, nah. Jesus, how can you keep getting motivated to keep going and going and going?
I know. But then the reasons that some people don't get roles is like, can be kind of like slightly arbitrary, as in like that's a great audition, that's a great actor. He's just not this guy. Yeah. He just doesn't quite fit that character description. But like, what an amazing actor. But you can't, you never get a chance to say that to them. They're just gone, and they're like, you're just like, oh God, he just hurt,
Does that add to the stress of your job, or the stress of maybe, because you know what it's feel like to be rejected? Is there something inside you that maybe likes to keep people happy, or likes a good environment?
So I definitely am a people pleaser. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to blue lights, it's total commitment to the end game.
Okay.
So if there has to, so you first of all, you choose the best actor for the role. Second of all, if there's any difficulty in terms of blue lights, any problems, I will stand my ground and die on a hill, because that's so important that's right. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I get notes all the time in the writing. Loads of them are good notes, from the BBC, exactly. Loads of them are good. But there'll be a few where I'm like, I don't agree with that. And I will put aside my desire to please people and just dig my heels in and say, no, we're not doing that. You have to, have to. Because if you bend over backwards all the time, you just end up with a bad back.
Yeah. Backwards. And it's so true. So let's so now we've gone through the stage of, I think our listeners will be so interested just in this part, and it's what we're going through the stages. And I think that, we've gone through the auditions. This is our team here.
These are our guys.
These are our guys. This is so hard.
This is our core team of actors. Yeah.
Is there an element of you're essentially bringing a team together? Can you see similarities between sports and this, in terms of us coming together and achieving this end goal, or is it very much
I do.
Themselves, or what?
No, I do. Especially on Blue Lights, because it's an ensemble drama. You've got a big team there, and it's about a section of cops. So that is a team that you're portraying. A lot of the research I did, I was able to go on ride-alongs with sections, and you see they're like a hurling team. They're like different personalities, different strengths, different weaknesses, all working towards the same goal, except their goal essentially often is to just get through to the end of the shift without anyone, getting hurt. So basically very similar to sport. You bring your actors together. We've been very lucky in that they all get on. As far as I can see anyway, everyone's like, they feel like a team when you bring them together. The younger ones, I think, as far as I'm aware, socialise together. I'm not invited, thankfully. But yeah, no, it feels like a team. And I was saying to I coach the under 13 hurling, which I have to say, this, apart from writing at this point in my life, is my biggest thing I get most pleasure from. And there's so many similarities, there's just so many similarities of like the teamwork there with those kids on that pitch, and then trying to run a set where people are basically happy but challenged. You can't be happy and complacent. You have to be like happy, but like sometimes stuff goes wrong and you have to deal with it.
Like a healthy competition as well.
Totally.
It is good. And I think that's incredible.
Professionalism. Everyone has to bring their game, and everybody has to be like bang on it. Whether you're a 13-year-old playing Johnny's on Monday night as we're about to do, or whatever, or you're an actor, a head of department on set, like, yeah, you have to be, just like I have to be writing it, like I have to be willing to stay up till 2 a.m. if that's what it takes and finish a draft, like.
And that's incredible. And that's before we finish off in terms of you looking after you mentioned there staying up to 2 a.m. and stuff. I'll park that and leave it for a second, but see how then do we go from we've gathered this team together, we've created a good, as you said there, they're socialising together, but whenever they need to be on it, they're on it. We're going in the right direction. Yeah. How then does that transcend into recording and on the TV and what's the end product in terms of, okay, job's done, I can sit back and be like, we're in a good spot here, or is there ever?
So 6 episodes will take you about 5 months to film, and then you're constantly in the edit. As soon as you start filming, they're being edited, and then you have a few more months after that to edit them. So it's just a really complex process of a lot of different people. HODs, we call them, heads of department. They all have to coalesce together at exactly the right time. So hair and makeup have to do their job, costume have to do their job, the gaffers, that's the lighting guys, they have to do their job. And sometimes I think it's a miracle that anything ever gets made, because you just need everything to like magically like slot into place for an exact point on an exact day where everyone's like, right, we're ready, go, and then the actors do their job. Then it's the editing process, it's constantly being edited, then constant re-edit. So you'll watch a cut of episode 1, like, yeah, I like that, but I'm not sure, can we change this scene, can we do that, can we like bring it down a bit, can we focus more on him or on her? That process takes months, and until eventually you run up against your deadlines. The BBC are saying we need this for X date, and eventually you just run out of road. So you could, like, if you had no deadlines, you'd probably edit shows and never put them out. Because you just like, make it a wee bit better, bring the music in 3 seconds earlier.
Back to you in your early days.
Yeah, totally, man. Like, there's an infinite amount of things you can do, so that's why you need to improve it. So you need deadlines. So especially if you're a perfectionist like Adam and I are. So then it's just a process, like a laborious process of getting the cuts ready, and then you send them to the BBC, and then they go on air a few weeks later, and that's it.
That's mental, isn't it?
And you wait, like, fingers crossed to see how it lands, what people think, because you do care what people think. I mean,
of course.
I mean, like, this idea that you say, I don't care, it's out there, I don't care what people know, that's rubbish. Like, of course you care what people think.
Of course, and we're always seeking that, and we always talk about on this, that sort of external validation that you are doing a good job. Because why would you be doing it then?
100%. Like, you want to be on a hurling field in a state of flow with people cheering you. You don't want to be going
over to me and saying, here, give us your autograph, or I think your class.
Yeah, of course, that's what you want. And TV is a mass audience medium. It's not like I'm writing, obscure short stories, although I would like to do that someday. But the point of it is to get an audience and for people to like it and be entertained, and so that's what you want. Like, you'd be disappointed if they're not.
Of course. So now that season 1's out, we've went and done all this hard work. Same again, we're going for season 2. You said it's going to be better than season 1. Your words, not my words.
What have I said?
No, I'm only saying, no pressure. But as a result of the success, then, Declan, somewhere in all this, there's we talked about characters, we talked about humans, we talked about human connection from a character to the person sitting on the sofa in their living room, stuff like that emotional attachment. Do you find it hard to have an emotional detachment in terms of whenever you're in this gung-ho of trying to make this happen? You said they're staying up to 2 in the morning. Impossible.
Like, so when I was on the front lines in the trenches of the writing of series 2, even though I might take a Saturday off and play football with the kids or go to hurling training or whatever, it's always in the back of your mind, I should be writing. And now, as I said earlier, I'm getting to the point where very soon there will be very little writing left to do, because we have to film and my job will be kind of coming to an end. But during that writing period, I find it impossible to delineate work from life. I've always had that problem, but 6 p.m. I don't get home and go, all right, now I'll have my dinner and watch TV and like whatever. No, like, just constantly thinking, I wonder if we change that or that. I don't think that scene works. But I've come to accept that now as the price of doing what I do, and I also weirdly, I don't even think it's necessarily that unhealthy, as long as you can get to the end of the project and then decompress, which is my plan coming now. Like, you know, get back into trying to be fit again, you know, like lose a bit of weight, be like eat healthier, because all those things have slightly gone out the window for 6 months. You know, it's just been that computer screen and, you know, set and all that. So, yeah, so now I want to take a wee bit of time after we're done here to just, you know, rebalance and then dive into whatever happens next. And like, for the first time in my life, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this driving over here. I'm not worrying or thinking about what happens next. I kind of don't care. I'm like, no, the priority is just, you know, decompress, be healthy. That'll work itself out, you know. Whereas previously I always would have been, I need to know.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, because it's probably where you're at now in terms of you're believing in what you're doing. I suppose that kind of might look after itself. But see,
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. See. On reflection of that, Declan, do you think that you could challenge that? Do you think you could challenge that? I'm not saying like. So say you're putting all the energy into you're all in.
All in.
We've discovered fully all in. Discovered that in this podcast that anything that you do, you are all in,
which is both a blessing and a curse, I think.
So do you think on reflection, say you're going to do a Blue Lights 3, that you could maybe say, hold on a minute here, I'm going to maybe spend 2 hours a week walking or running?
Yes.
Or do you think there's a space for that, or do you think it's harder for you as a person?
No, it's funny. I was talking to Breeze about this last week, right? That's a big if, you know, if there's Blue Lights 3, like let's see how 2 does and stuff. But let's say Blue Lights 3 or anything, right? But something of that magnitude. I was talking to her about this last week, and I was like I have to find a way to make this more of a job, right? So I have to find a way to drop the kids to school, come back, do, you know, 4 to 5 hours writing, you know, hang out with the kids for a few hours, you know, maybe look over it again in the evening, and then have being more of a normal person. Like, I have to do that, like, because doing it this way, I think, is kind of unsustainable. Okay. But it would take a lot of analysis and training for me to get there, I think, because it's the way that I've lived my whole life. But it's funny that you bring that up, because I'm literally thinking about that right now. It's like it needs to be less. It needs to be still good and still fully committed, but not as all-consuming, because I don't think it's good. You know, now I do have a few things in my life. Like, obviously, I have my family, and I spend time with my kids and hang out with Breeze all the time. And I have the hurling coaching, which is a massive, like, almost a weird salvation for me. Like, we're training today at 5, and I'm super looking forward to it. So I have these things that get me out of it, but I could do much better. Like, I could do better.
Maybe come for a dip in the mornings with me, and we could go to Joxer for a breakfast after.
I am so up for that, right? Literally, I'm really interested in the cold water swimming thing. I did it with Neil McManus, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Was it last year, the year before? In February. It was absolutely horrendous, right?
I was up with him the other night. Did you see my Instagram story?
No.
11 o'clock and on a Tuesday night, me and him in the water with the headlights pointing into
That's amazing. But now, presumably, like, the water's all right this time of year, is it? I mean, honestly, that day we went in, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Like, but anyway, no, I'm super interested in doing that. I would love to do that. I just need to wind it in a bit. Yeah, and kind of plan it all better. Like,
when season 2 of Blue Lights?
We don't know. We don't have a transmission date yet. I would, if I had to take a wild guess, I'd say April, maybe May, maybe something like that. But yeah, they haven't told us yet.
Just see what happens. But I think that I would love to talk to you even more about even go into it even more in terms of what way it looks, and I would actually love to like do a day's work experience with you and be like, wow, this is incredible, because me and Annette, and I know she's going to be watching this because she's obsessed with you, Annette Kelly. Little Penny Thoughts.
Oh yes, I saw her on the podcast.
Yeah. And we're always slagging, like, when are we getting our breakthrough in our acting careers now?
Man, so come and visit set.
I said
both of you come and visit.
Yeah, I said to her, Annette, I'll get you on Blue Lights. So Annette, here you are.
That's a deal. That's a deal. You're in. No, both of you come and visit us for sure.
We will. We would love that.
No, you're totally invited. But yeah, man, it's been a ride, like, the last 3 years, but great. You know, just great and kind of weird. It's been fun.
Class, Declan. Thanks very much,
man. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Right, I was as I said, I was really nervous about it. I was like, oh shit, he's going to want to talk about like my feelings, and you did, and you did.
But it's amazing because at the end of the day, it's a wee bit like, it's a wee bit like finding characters and actors and stuff like that. All the world is interested in is getting to know the human being behind the title or behind the whatever. The mask.
Totally, man, and realizing it's fun, but it's not all giggles, and but also, I have to say, like, obviously we talked before you started this podcast, and I'm a fan of the podcast, and like the work you're doing here in terms of stimulating conversation and just it's really bloody important. Like, it's great.
Oh, thanks very much. It means a lot, and it's great because I've got to meet, by me being so open and honest, I suppose, and showing my true colours and being vulnerable, I've got to meet some amazing people.
No, you have. It's some cracking podcasts, like,
and it's been class. And I think that even us becoming friends, the night we done that podcast, there was an instant connection that I can text you and you can say to me, come and take the kids, and you can come here.
Totally, yeah.
And I just think that's special, and that's the result of me just being me. And that's a result of you being you. Yeah. And the whole idea is the result for you, the listeners, to step into you being your authentic self and being maybe a wee bit vulnerable and talking about that, okay, I'm really successful in life, things are going well, but, I still have feelings, and it's okay to feel the feelings and maybe do something different the next time. And
and also, recognising your flaws and
laughing at them, because you need to have a bit of crack.
Man.
Declan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We will... tag Declan stuff on below the description, and you can go and look at but we're really looking forward to season 2 of Blue Lights coming out. It's going to be class, and a huge thanks again to Joxer for supporting this week's episode. Really appreciate it. You'll see me and Declan soon after a morning dip with our nice breakfast: poached eggs, sourdough, avocado.
I'm doing it.
No chicken waffles. We're on the grind.
We're on
it. Yes, and I will see you all next week. Thank you.
Cheers,
thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, that was great fun.